X lies during divorce to have me jailed, and instead he is left with remorse. I was getting divorced in the early 90s. My ex was pissed that I was divorcing him. I owned the house prior to the marriage, so he moved out, but he broke back in and tore up all kinds of things, tore up my jewelry, my clothes, he cut holes in all of them, etc. I couldn't prove it, but of course it was him. When we went to divorce court, he gave the judge a 2-page list of things that he supposedly brought to the house with him prior to marriage that I refused to return. My attorney showed me the list, and it was stuff that he never owned in the first place. He totally wanted me thrown in jail for contempt of court. My alternative way is to pay like $2,000, and I wasn't about to do that. I opted for jail, but my friends kept telling me just to pay it. I refused. 2 days before I was to appear in court, a girlfriend of mine asked if she could see the list. Sure. She noted that things he said were there didn't give much, if any, of a description. For example, he says there's a gun. He didn't say what kind of gun. He said there was a computer, and he didn't say what kind of computer, and so on. Her point was that if I went around and bought everything on the list, it would probably cost me about $200, and that was worth staying out of jail. I agreed, knowing it would also be worth him being livid that his plan didn't work. So I made a game of it. I went around to pawn shops and resale stores, and I told whoever was in charge there that I was on a scavenger hunt, and I briefly explained what was going on. They all loved the idea and helped me get through my list rather quickly. Here are some lovely examples of what was boxed up for him. Gun. An old rusty cap gun screwdriver set. Same old and rusty clothing. Goodwill horrid stuff bust/statue. Made one myself from clay knives. Old and rusty camping gear. An old pan. Matches and a tiny tarp. And one of my favorites that I remember was, he said he had a Monopoly game. So I sent him a Goodwill find without any of the pieces, just the board. I wish I could remember everything that we got. It was so much fun, and when we got home, we had to videotape boxing them all up and going through the items one by one. My attorney told the judge that I had found at the attic and I just hadn't seen it before. So sorry. The judge told my attorney to simply drop the box off at his attorney's office and that the divorce was final. My only regret is not being able to see his face when he opened up that box of garbage. And there was nothing he could say because he made the stuff up in the first place. It's been 30 years and I still get joy thinking about it. Gave a grabby guy at the bar a taste of his own medicine. I was out at a club hanging with some girlfriends when a group of guys walked past. My girlfriend looked uncomfortable. I asked what was wrong. She told me one of the guys in the group had grabbed her ass. I asked which guy and followed them inside. I went right up to the guy in question and asked, "Hey, did you grab my girlfriend's ass?" To which he smirked and responded, "Yeah, so?" I didn't even think before I was reaching down to grab him by the balls. Hard. He was screaming while I shouted, "Yeah, you like that? You like being grabbed by strangers?" I noticed his friends laughing and video recording, so I went up to one and dramatically tried to make out with him, which he was disgusted by. Security escorted me outside, but they were laughing. They said what I did was hilarious, but they had it handled. They didn't kick me out, but told me it was probably best if I went home for the night. Edit. Y'all are so annoying. Nothing I can say will make you believe my story, so what's the point in trying? It's frustrating like fuck. I just wanted to share a funny story. If you don't believe it, that's fine. The people who were there know the truth. Edit 2. My boyfriend pointed out that I did make a mistake telling the story. Apparently security didn't find it as funny as my drunk self thought they did. He corrected me and told me that they didn't disagree with what you did, but they had it handled and said you should probably go home for the night. So there you go. Shitty server demands a better tip. A couple months back, my boyfriend and I went out for drinks one night at this cool little speakeasy in Montreal. It's actually quite an interesting place. You come in through a nondescript entrance and the place has a really nice vibe going on once you get inside. Note, this is one of those bars where the server comes to your table and serves the drinks rather than one where you order at the bar and take the drinks back yourself. We were seated at our table by the server. We ordered a couple cocktails, and then a couple more, and then a couple more after that. Each time we had to order, my boyfriend or I would have to go fetch the server so he would take our order or go up to the bar, order, and then bring the drinks back ourselves. Then, when it came time for the bill, I went up again so he would come to our table. He came and thought we were going to order again despite me clearly asking for the bill when I went up. So he went back to get the card machine, and it was another 10 minutes before he was back. At this point, I was quite ticked off at the not-so-great service and was debating whether or not I should tip him. The screen had an option for 10%, 15%, 20%, or other. I decided to just leave 10% as I wanted to avoid an argument with the server. Montreal service employees are pretty damn notorious when it comes to the expectation of tips. Now, he prints out the receipt and takes a look at it and sees I left 10%. He then asks if we had a nice evening, to which my boyfriend responded that we did. We both thought it was just a standard question servers ask, so we didn't bother telling him about the poor service received. Especially because it wouldn't really make a difference at this point. The guy then says, "Oh, well, if you had such a nice time, then you should have left at least a 15% tip. Because, in Canada, it's customary to leave a minimum 15% when the service is good." I'm guessing the reason he felt the need to outline that's how it is in Canada is because I'm a brown guy. Now comes the petty part. I responded, "Oh, I didn't know. Why don't you cancel this bill and redo it so I can tip you properly?" He said, "Sure thing, just give me a second because the manager has to approve bill cancellations." Again, we waited a good 10 minutes for him to come back with the new bill. I was happy to wait, though, because once he came back, I put in the PIN and then selected the other option for tip and left him 0%. He printed out the receipt and his look of disbelief was well worth it. We got up and my white Canadian boyfriend said, "Our only tip for you is to give better service and not be so much of an asshole. In Canada, we don't really like assholes." Roommate stole my washcloths, so I decided to let her steal one more. My freshman year, I had the most inconsiderate roommate who'd stay up all night talking loudly, eat my food, etc. Oddly, my washcloths that I used to wash my face would go missing. I think I lost like 3 or 4 throughout the semester. I thought someone was taking them, but I had no idea where to. Well, the end of the semester, we were clearing out the bathroom cabinets to move out, and what did I find shoved in the far back corners of the cabinet? My washcloths, which were covered in orange foundation. Clearly evidence from my one rude roommate because she wore so much foundation every single day. I was super annoyed because I had to keep buying more washcloths to replace the ones she stole. Well, I decided to use one of my other washcloths and clean the disgusting bathtub with it. I'm talking ring of shampoo, dirt, hair everywhere, etc. I was planning to just throw it away afterwards, but I decided to hang it up and let it dry. In the same place I would hang my washcloths for my face. The next day, the washcloth I had used for the bathtub was covered in orange foundation. The look on her face when I told her. No regrets. My neighbor cursed me for using my own yard. Well, I'm going to use it even more. So, I have lived in a townhouse for the last 3 years. I live with my husband and 2 60-pound dogs. For a bit of background, I got attacked by a dog just before my neighbors moved in 2.5 years ago, which left me with a fear of strange animals up until recently when I was able to work through my trauma with my therapist. My neighbors have 4 loud and reactive dogs, 3 Chihuahuas, and 1 Australian Shepherd, which charge the fence whenever they see someone on the other side and bark constantly. This had prevented me from using my backyard for the last 2 summers. Now that I have worked past the panic attacks and fear, I am spending a majority of weekends in my yard and let my dogs go back and forth freely from the yard. My dogs have been well socialized and don't have any interest in the fence when the other dogs are reacting. Up until yesterday, when the neighbors' dogs come out, I would bring my dogs inside, but it would still mean a minute or so for their dogs to calm down. I would let my dogs back outside to play when the neighbors go back in. This was no big deal to me. Now cue Sunday. The neighbors let their dogs out, they react, I bring my dogs in. Same old routine. Except my neighbor curses me under her breath, "Keep your fucking door shut." This is not the first time they have been rude either. This gets under my skin considering her dog's reactivity is the reason I did not feel comfortable in my own backyard, and it is not my dogs who are reactive. Plus, I have always been the one to bring my dogs in, not the neighbor. So I've started to be a bit petty. Now when the neighbor lets their dogs out, I stay out and play fetch with my dogs while her animals are going apeshit, instead of bringing my dogs inside as I have always done. My dogs love it because they are getting more exercise than before. It's only been 3 days, and my neighbor is exasperated and has to chase her dogs around the garden. Side note, they have another dog on the opposite side of them, which they are equally reactive to, as well. I have patio furniture being delivered tomorrow, and I fully expect to enjoy my yard to the fullest this summer. After a week or 2, I'll probably put up a visual blockade so her dogs can't see mine to be nice, but I'm not going to restrict my well-trained animals for her untrained ones any longer. Don't appreciate my courtesy, I won't give it. Sister always steals my food. I make a fool of myself on her graduation to stop her. I come from a family of 6. My parents, my older sister, my older brother, my little brother, and me. Often, in order to bribe us into good behavior, our parents would buy us our favorite candy to munch on in the car. Now, I've never exactly been a giving person, not huge on sharing just for the sake of sharing. My parents, however, were trying to raise respectful and generous kids and often forced me to share things even when I didn't want to. That's all fine and good, except that my sister abused this system. See, she would say she didn't want a bag of candy. Then once we were on the road, she'd start taking candy from all three of the brothers. That really pissed me off. I didn't get candy often, as my mom didn't like feeding us sugary food. So when I got my own bag of Sour Patch watermelon, I wanted to eat every last one myself. Besides, my parents would always offer to buy her a bag of candy for herself. She would just refuse because she knew she could leech off the rest of us. So after a point, I started refusing her request for candy. But that shit didn't fly with my mom, because that was being selfish, so she would force me to hand over the candy. One time I even said when I purchased my bag at CVS, "Sister, I'm not going to give you any of my candy. If you want Sour Patch, buy your own right now." "I'm fine," she responded. "I don't want a whole bag of candy." Fast forward 20 minutes into the car ride. My father was requisitioning a candy to give to my sister as I sat fuming. This went on for years. My whole life, really. And I hated it. I would hide my candy when I got it. I would try and keep it out of her reach, but always a parent would intervene. Fast forward to my sister's college graduation. She is now 22. I am a senior in high school at this point, and we're up at her school at a fancy-ass restaurant celebrating after she had graduated that morning. In attendance are all immediate and some extended family, some close friends of my sister, and her long-term boyfriend who I was meeting for the first time. So, enough people for the following to be embarrassing to my family. Our meal ends and my mother offers to buy a nice dessert for anyone who wants it. My brothers, my dad, and I all take her up on it. I ordered a vanilla bean cheesecake with a burnt sugar bird's nest on top. My mother repeatedly offers to buy my sister anything she wants, but my sister says she couldn't possibly eat a full dessert right now and turns it down every time. The food arrives, and everyone is staring at mine. I'm sitting right at the head of the table in full view of everyone, so it's hard not to look. And aside from the cake slice being large and delicious looking, the burnt sugar bird's nest is huge and ornate. Hollow on the inside like a fucking old-timey brass globe or some shit. Honestly, it was pretty impressive. And right as the food gets placed in front of us, my sister says, "I'll just have a bite of every once." At this point, I'm seeing red, having flashbacks to all the times my food has been stolen. Logically, the right thing to do would have been to just hand over one bite. I mean, it was her graduation. It was a huge cake. It would have been no loss. But it had become a matter of principle. So, the moment she says this, in one fell swoop, in full view of everyone at the table, I sweep up my slice of cheesecake and stuff the entire thing into my mouth at once, shattering the sugar nest, crumbs falling everywhere. In front of my whole family and some college students close to my sister who, again, never met in my life. My sister stares, appalled, and says, "Did you do that just so I wouldn't get any?" And I look at her, cheeks ballooning out like a chipmunk, face covered in cheesecake and graham, dead in the eyes, and nod. There was a fair bit of shocked silence at that moment and in the very tense car ride home. But to this day, she never asks for anything from me anymore. I got my 6th grade bully fired and his GF to break up with him. When I was in 6th grade, I was being bullied by this boy in my grade. We'll call him Tom. He bullied me every day, especially during P.E. class. I remember thinking about how I was going to enact my revenge on him one day. Well, fast forward to 10 years later, I am working at a popular lunch spot, and my manager asked me about hiring this new guy named Tom. I knew it was him, and I gave him a bad recommendation, but that wasn't the end of it, because he still got hired. I found out that Tom had a girlfriend who he was trying to keep a secret. Anyways, one of my coworkers who happened to be the niece of the owner tells me she has a big crush on Tom and that they had sex the other night. I say to her, "That's crazy, did you know about his girlfriend?" To say she was shocked was an understatement. My coworker immediately asked me for the girlfriend's Facebook information, which I eagerly gave to her. She writes up a beautiful Facebook message to Tom's girlfriend, telling her everything that had happened between them the night before, and then, after that, she goes home and tells the owner about what slimeball Tom truly was. Tom got fired like a week later, and his girlfriend broke up with him. Haha. The customer who tipped a fake $100 bill. This is not my story. This happened to my friend. They don't use Reddit, and when they told me this, I had to share because I love it, and I'd never expect it from the friend who did it. I work as a server. This one guy always comes in the restaurant I work at. He usually is pretty quiet and never tips too well. Most of the time, he comes with a couple of friends or by himself and sits at the bar and watches a sports game. I've never had a problem with him until he came in one time with a date. I've never seen the woman before, so I assumed they were new to dating. Anyways, they sit at a table this time in a more quiet part of the restaurant, and they were sat at one of my tables. I had no problem with them, and everything was going fine. They asked for the check, and I went right around the corner from their table. It was close by, so I was quick. As I was coming back to the table, the guy says to the woman, "Watch this," as he puts down a $100 bill on the table. He saw me see, and he was joking like, "Oh, you weren't supposed to see that." I was ecstatic either way, even though it was so obvious he was trying to impress the woman. I didn't care. I waited till they left to go grab the $100 bill. Well, when I unfolded it, it was one of the fake $100 bills, I guess, for pranks. That means this freaking guy planned this out to impress this woman. It was so frustrating because I needed the money, but at the same time I thought it was because I did a great job. Either the woman was in on it, or he decided to be a jerk in two different ways. Told my manager, and he was like, "Wow, that's ridiculous." I decided to hold on to it because I knew the day would come when I could get back at this guy. 2 weeks later, my manager recognizes the guy, and while I was working at the time, I was in a different side of the restaurant which was already full. My manager found me and asked if I wanted that customer's table as well and told me he was with the woman from last time. I often joked with my manager about throwing the fake $100 back on the table in front of that woman if he ever came back to embarrass him. I thought to myself, yeah, I may be busy already, but I also thought, sure, what's one more table? Told my manager absolutely, no problem, with a smirk on my face. Before I went over to their table, I ran out to my car to grab the fake $100 that was sitting in my cup holder for this exact moment. I get to their table and they instantly recognize me. The woman seemed normal, but the guy looked like he was nervous. I pretended nothing happened all the way until I got their check. When I brought the check back, I placed it down on the table as well as the fake 100, but left it unfolded so the fake part was showing. I looked at the guy and said, "Hey, not sure if you remember me from last time, but I believe you forgot this. Just returning it because I believed it was too much." The woman looked very confused, so I instantly knew she was not a part of it, but the guy got all nervous and said, "I don't know what that is." I said, "Oh, my mistake," and laughed and said to the woman, "Have a good night," and walked away. When I came back, there was a big $0 on the signed copy and a $50 bill, real this time, where the woman was sitting after they had left. One can only assume that the guy didn't want a tip on his card, so he wrote obnoxiously big zeros on the tip, and that $50 just happened to be where the woman was sitting, so I'm hoping she had placed it there. Now, I don't know what happened with the couple or if they stayed together, but I haven't seen them back since, and it's been a few weeks, and I really hope she looks for his red flags now.